Phones tilt like bayonets as a grainy clip loops across timelines. A waitress in a red apron cradles a midnight black smartphone while suits jeer and lenses close in. Security hands seize her elbows. She doesn't fight, only stiffens as a stranger's voice narrates the theft with smug certainty. The camera never catches the host stand, the buzzing screen, or the cascade of urgent banners she tried to silence. It captures humiliation, pure, public, algorithmic. Someone slow-mos the moment her eyes break, freezing on shame like a trophy. By morning, lobby screens play it between stock tickers. By noon, a gossip site stitches it to an old expulsion headline. In the reflections of passing cars, she watches herself become a cautionary tale. A caption smirks that rich men should guard their toys. 48 hours earlier, the phone hadn't even been in her hands. Bellen's Tuesday quiet hums with polished silver and the low ocean of conversations that never crest. Table 7 radiates entitlement beneath a halo of pendant light. Logan Reed sits alone, immaculate suit, immaculate frown, treating the wine list like a deposition. Sophie Hale approaches with steady posture and careful eyes. The posture learned from double shifts, and the eyes from a law library she can't afford to enter again. He complains about a cork that never failed, about a note the grapes never sang. She nods, corrects nothing, swaps the bottle, absorbs the blow. In the mirrored back bar, she catches the reflected geometry of power: his card, his cufflinks, his boredom. Her own reflection is smaller, framed by tulips of glass. She stacks plates with the precision of case citations, carries sauces like evidence, and files his disdain in the drawer labeled, "Not worth bleeding over." Closing lull settles like dust on linen. The hiss of the espresso wand fades. Chairs flip on tables in a choreography of endings. At 7, his plate cools, his jacket gone, his card left with exactness that says he owns time. On the white field of the tablecloth, a phone glows like an omen. Sophie lifts it with a reflex of service, meaning to run after him, meaning to be done with this, meaning nothing permanent. It vibrates a staccato rhythm against her palm. Subject lines hammer urgency: contract revisions, deadline, Wilson draft. The screen dims, buzzing resumes. Her name isn't on the device, yet the pressure slides into her ribs like a question with only one answer. She pockets it for the host stand, tells herself not to care, counts tips, gathers checks. The phone won't stop shivering, as if a distant engine were revving through her pocket. In the corridor where staff jokes fade into mop bucket echoes, the screen blooms with an incoming call stamped in capital importance. Sophie hesitates, then swipes, because silence can be crueler than action. A compressed voice floods her ear, urgent with fees and clauses. The world narrows to email headers, attachments, section numbers. Her old habits unfurl like parachutes: structure, definitions, appendices, the hidden fangs of subsections. She reads the revised draft on reflex, maps meaning to consequence, follows a thread into the wall. The clause is venom dressed as indemnity, retroactive liability that would make Reed Innovations pay for history it never authored. Another trigger hides in performance metrics that point to a missing appendix like a magician's empty hand. Somewhere, midnight leans closer. In the dining room, someone laughs over espresso foam. In the message preview, a name she knows appears like a bruise: Whitman.
Footsteps enter the corridor like a verdict. Logan Reed stops at the end of the line, eyes going first to the phone, then to her face. The room compresses around posture and silence. Sophie keeps her back straight, the screen angled. The clause is ready in her mouth if he demands them. He doesn't need words to accuse, his jaw does it. Shame burns in her throat, but not for the reason the clip will suggest. She explains without apology, the language clinical, the risk map crisp. He watches the screen. Disbelief displaces fury. Calculation replaces both. Somewhere between two lines of legalese, the power differential shifts by a hair's breadth. Still, the humiliation sticks. A server with a stranger's device, a room that could always decide she is incredible. When he leaves, the corridor feels colder. She returns to polishing cutlery, like polishing a closing argument no one will hear. The city wounds itself with neon, and then numbs the pain with taxis. Sophie walks home under leftover starlight, the aproned version of her hanging from a hook in her mind, empty and creased. At the crosswalk, her phone flashes with an unknown number and gratitude that reads like capital. The message is precise, restrained, unmistakable. She saved a company. It lands with the weight of a scholarship letter unopened on an old desk. She types a neutral reply, pockets doubt with her keys, and climbs past neighbors who measure success in rent paid on time. On her kitchen counter, the landlord's notice curls at the edge. In the bedroom, the ceiling is a slow carousel of streetlight shadows. She tells herself to sleep. Instead, she catalogs the trap's cunning until a dawn bird drills through concrete quiet. The single bottle tip glints alone in a jar that swallows coins.
Televisions in bodegas and barbershops speak the same language of plunging charts and righteous anchors. A chyron bites with relish as it names a collapsed deal and hints at a predator disguised as partner. Sophie's coffee goes cold when the surname arrives, Whitman. A ghost with manicured hands brushes her shoulder. A classroom door she once walked through slams without wind. The montage is cruelly efficient. Charity galas, business panels, a smile built to hide a bite. The failure maps cleanly to performance clauses, the kind that punish ambition for breathing. She watches commuters nod like referees who missed the foul but love the ejection. Somewhere in glass higher than hope, Logan Reed becomes a man with enemies, and she becomes something worse than anonymous. She wipes her cup, checks the bank app with ritual despair, and wishes she could afford to pretend the past is unrelated. At noon, the city hums its working song. Sophie clears a stack of breakfast dishes that never existed and pretends the landlord is a myth. Her phone vibrates with a professionalism that sounds like appointment books and tinted SUVs. A voice measured by corporate calendars offers an opportunity wrapped in specifics. A ride at 6:30, a consulting window, a fee that could pry 3 months' fear off her mother's shoulders. She says she will think, then thinks of hospital corridors and a purse inventory of receipts and mints. The number lands in her messages like a guilt card she never asked for. Class divides aren't just fabric and foyers, they're margins on invoices in the silence between overdue and humiliation. She tells no one. She readjusts the knot of her apron with the care of someone bandaging a wound. When the clock hands circle, she will step into another air.
The rooftop restaurant floats above the city like a ship-turned chandelier. Wind grazes linen. Glass walls catch half a metropolis inside their angles. Logan Reed waits by a table where the skyline performs on cue. Sophie arrives armored in a navy dress from a former life, the seam allowance tight with memory. He radiates intent without raising his voice. The room treats him like weather. A leather portfolio becomes a confession when she opens it. Years of clauses trimmed to trap, indemnities stacked like dominoes pointed one direction. The pattern is predation, disguised as partnership. He listens with the quiet of someone who pays for silence, then slides context across the table with the same elegant efficiency. Between the amuse-bouche and the second course, the distance between waitress and witness narrows to a single sheet of paper. Somewhere below, a siren rises, laughs, and forgets their names. Power makes research a short walk. Logan knows more than he admits, enough to say her expulsion wasn't incompetence, but architecture. The portfolio shifts to her history without changing weight. Sophie feels an old courtroom stand up inside her, the one that cracked when a dean closed a file with relief. The language around her always belonged to others: tuition bills, disciplinary letters, recommendation emails that evaporated mid-sentence. Here it is treated like evidence worth keeping. Humiliation is an echo. It returns whenever the right walls are built. She stares at the city while an inner projector throws a lecture hall onto glass, the scrape of a chair leg louder than a gavel. He doesn't offer pity, because pity eats respect. He offers work. She tastes metal beneath dessert sugar, the aftertaste of being seen and measured and found useful. Outside, clouds drag knives of rain across distant roofs.
Partnerships can be signed with eye contact when the tablecloth is white enough. Logan sets terms that sound like alignment instead of acquisition, analysis, pattern mapping, evidence ladders. Sophie sets conditions like handrails, transparency, limits, no romance masquerading as protection. They agree in the language of professionals who know how quickly gravity returns. Justice becomes a shared noun tied to two histories stitched by the same names. He mentions his father like a man exchanging a business card he never wanted to print. She hears the exhaustion in a grief worn to satin. A gust stains the table with river smell. The city below them stacks opportunities and appetites. Above them, a helicopter toys with proximity. They leave without touching. On the elevator down, she catalogs the cost of saying yes. On the ride home, a black car's windows mirror her face back in glossy insignificance. Reed Innovations reaches upward with the confidence of something never told no. The lobby arranges stone and light into a sermon. Security gates separate breath from access with a polite beep. Upstairs, the office assigned to Sophie gleams with screens and ergonomic intent. She has never owned furniture that assumed her shoulders matter. Outside the glass, employees move like file paths, quick and well-indexed. Inside, the quiet asks her to become who she was training to be before the floor was pulled. A law reference database opens like a forgiving ocean. She builds a folder tree named after enemies and clauses. She drinks water from a bottle that pretends money has no taste. Through the glass wall, two analysts point without pointing. The waitress in the CEO wing acquires nicknames before lunch. She breathes on the pain and doesn't draw a heart, only a straight line.
Fame arrives through the side door when reputation forgets to lock it. The clip from Bellin resurfaces with a soundtrack that edits out urgency and leaves appetite. It spreads faster than facts can lace their shoes. A blog remixes it with headlines about dishonesty and past academic stains braided like rope. In the cafeteria line, someone tisks theatrically. In an elevator, a stranger studies her reflection instead of her. Shame is a temperature, it flushes skin and fogs judgment. Sophie watches the phone turn her into an archetype, the grasping server, the striver caught sprinting. The context disappears because context kills virality. She scrubs through frames and finds her own swallowed protest. Across town, a man with an expensive haircut watches the same clip and smiles without his eyes. The algorithm rewards his precision. She adds another task to her list: survive optics while dismantling the trap. Afternoons at altitude feel like thin air, thoughts skipping across synapses to save oxygen. Sophie is knee-deep in indemnities when her friend Elena's name trembles onto the screen. The voice is wired tight, urgency stretched until it frays. Bradley Whitman knows where she is, who she sits near, what car picked her up last night. The line tears mid-sentence into static and self-doubt. Dropped calls are common, targeted interference is not. The office temperature feels colder though the thermostat doesn't move. She saves her notes, backs up again, checks the blinds, remembers that paranoia is sometimes merely math performed correctly. Down in the lobby, marble veining becomes a map of pressure points. She wants ordinary problems like iced coffee diluted past usefulness. Instead, the fear is specific. Men leaning on cars with patience for intimidation, a smile that waits around corners, a family that treats consequences like bargaining chips.
Security pings rise like sonar from earpieces when Lineage enters a building without permission. Bradley Whitman arrives at the desk with a lawyer's smirk and a donor's entitlement. He demands, implies, threatens, three tenses of the same verb. Cameras soak him in angles, phones begin to tilt again. Upstairs, Sophie hears the name ripple outward through text chains, a virus with impeccable tailoring. Logan renders decisions like cuts, deny entry, adjust security, reroute personnel. There is no grand announcement, just a quiet exfiltration plan that tastes like contingency rehearsed too often. The service elevator coughs open, smelling of storage and solvents. Sophie rides down with a security lead and the knowledge that power always knows the back doors of palaces. In the parking level, the concrete sweat is a second skin. She steps into a car that promises anonymity and knows anonymity is a currency about to inflate. Neighborhoods remember faces, and tonight hers is an alert on someone else's list. The sedan idles 2 blocks short while the security driver traces a route like threading a needle through alleys. Sophie recognizes one of the men parked near her building by posture, not by name. Watching is a profession as old as debt. A thin lamp burns behind her mother's curtain, the signal of a life that believes in routine as armor. The impulse to run upstairs and pack a bag is ferocious, but ferocity without plan is bait. The driver narrates nothing, hands steady at 10 and 2. Sophie texts 3 words and receives back a prayer in plain language. The sedan slides away without headlights for a block. She presses her palm against the cool window and vows that humiliation may travel fast, but she will learn to outrun the angles it prefers.
Safety wears expensive shoes when it moves quickly. Reed's security teams unfold across the city with the choreography of people who rehearse worst days. Carmen Alvarez is escorted from an apartment that smells of cumin and bleach into a car that smells of new leather and discretion. Sophie's phone buzzes with updates couched in courteous syntax, while the images in her head are sharp and unadorned. The penthouse receiving her is glass and stone and soft things grown in fields she has never walked. Every surface reflects her smallness until she refuses to measure that way. Jenna Marshall outlines protocols, codes, burners, emergency exits with the calm of a person paid to stay unafraid. Rachel King, the driver, asks nothing, answers everything with timing. Class speaks softly here, through silk hangers and quieter HVAC. Sophie stands in a guest room worth more than her building and promises it won't change her spine. Midnight peels back the city's careful paint. An alarm traces a sharp line through the penthouse's hush, followed by a call that compresses updates into bullet points. Reed Tower's secure levels registered forced access attempts. The offices housing their work were the first doors tested. Nothing taken, everything targeted. It is the kind of event that insists on coincidence while sneering at it. Sophie sees their list of clauses as a pile of glass marbles someone tried to kick downstairs, only to find the staircase slicked with oil. She thinks less of danger and more of chain of custody, of how quickly hard drives and narratives can be swapped. Logan's face, when he arrives from answering his own war rooms, is a study in contained fire. The city beyond the windows blinks as if in on the joke. Night reclaims quiet, but now it's the watchful kind that fences sleep.
Dawn dilutes shadows into things that can lie again. Sophie inventories choices and finds most have been pre-selected by threat. She wants out, not because she distrusts the walls, but because geography shouldn't dictate integrity. Logan argues with the certainty of men who pay retainer fees that dwarf some people's anniversaries. Safety is a word that can inflate to cover whatever the powerful want covered. She recognizes his impulse as protective, which is another name for control when it forgets to listen. He adjusts, but only toward what he thinks is reasonable. The argument degrades into silence that hurts less than the clip. In the kitchen, the coffee machine obeys, which feels like progress. Sophie decides to stay, not because of his insistence, but because running would turn her into the very story they want. The city brightens like a cross-examination light. She squares her shoulders and takes the stand. Grief, when domesticated, learns to wear suits. Logan speaks of his father without theatrics, placing facts on the table with the slow respect of someone assembling a memorial puzzle. A prototype, a refusal, a suspicious accident where alarms went mute and permissions aligned too neatly. The Whitman name flickers around the edges like a watermark only visible at certain angles. Sophie listens as the burn line between corporate competition and vindictive sabotage sharpens. Revenge would be cleaner. Justice is heavy. She understands how humiliation evolves into purpose when given a spine to climb. The weight of the admission changes the room, relocates the fulcrum of their work from ledger to grave. Outside, a plane threads the afternoon.
Inside, the air stills. Two stories braided by the same predator twist toward a single destination. The heat between them becomes not romance, but combustion waiting for legal oxygen. People form alliances in boardrooms and basements. This one forms over the quiet recognition of matching scars. Sophie opens the file of her past and lets the ugliness breathe. Persistence turned predatory, rejection rewritten as evidence, a dean's pen scratching relief onto paper. Humiliation is not a single moment. It is a series of rooms she was escorted through. Logan's jaw tightens in the disciplined way of men raised not to shatter glass they own. The pact hardens into plan. Catalog every predatory clause, isolate signatures of intent, cultivate a witness inside the machine. They will wear patience like a uniform and speed like a sidearm. They will keep their private ache private because public battles devour intimacy and then hunger for more. When the meeting ends, nothing ceremonial marks the binding. The skyline doesn't applaud, but the floor beneath them feels less fragile than yesterday. The federal building's lobby carries the smell of bureaucracy polished to a sheen. Security trays swallow belts and keys and illusions. Assistant U.S. Attorney Catherine Delaney receives them with the lean economy of a woman who has forgotten how to waste time. Conference room glass contains relief and dread in equal volumes. Sophie narrates the slow drowning of her name with clinical precision, threading humiliation to the clauses that birthed it. Logan lays out patterns, dates, payments, emails with subject lines that pretend to be mundane. The recorder blinks a red dot that feels like a witness finally on her side. Delaney listens without interrupting, then begins to assemble the case aloud the way some surgeons talk through procedures. Sophie leaves the building lighter and hollow, as if a tumor has been removed and absence still weighs something. Outside, pigeons execute perfect turns without anyone ordering them to.
Retaliation arrives dressed as process. Whitman lawyers file suppression motions with confident fonts, accusing Reed of entrapment, Sophie of vendetta-driven fabrication. Old articles bloom anew with the vigor of mold in damp corners. Trolls discover her name again, scrape it with miner's picks, and sell fragments for likes. She sits before a camera to explain in measured language why clauses mean what they mean, why intent can be typed and then denied, why absence of an appendix is a presence of malice. The court calendar becomes a drumline. In the mirror, her posture adjusts by degrees, a centimeter of steel added daily. Humiliation doesn't vanish, it becomes background radiation. She treats it like weather, dress for it, don't argue with it. Somewhere, Bradley rehearses outrage from microphones that will believe him until they don't. The motion hearing date lands on her desk like a pistol placed gently. Sophie's gift has always been structural hearing, the ability to listen to documents until they confess rhythm. At 3 a.m, under the blue hum of too much screen, she hears a tick where there should be a talk. The PDF's metadata whispers inconsistencies, a creation time that predates an email, a time zone drift that can't exist without deliberate hands. She follows the breadcrumbs into the server log forest, mapping headers, comparing checksums, building a chain that won't snap under cross. The next day, the courtroom holds its breath while defense counsel performs indignation. Then her counsel lays the timestamps in a row like teeth and invites the judge to bite. Suppression collapses without theatrics, only with the quiet satisfaction of gravity doing its work. Outside, microphones search for anger and find relief. Sophie sits on a bench afterward and lets the simple pleasure of breath fill her sternum.
Control is a drug that persuades men they can shout in private. During a strategy call, Bradley Whitman savages an internal fixer for failing to produce results. He forgets the calendar invite includes a muted paralegal whose muting fails. Hot mics love arrogance. The fixer, humiliated to bone and salary, becomes generous with archives. Emails ooze out like oil from an old pipeline. Pressure tactics, clause recipes, draft swaps, the language of theft polished to plausible deniability. Journalists will need weeks to contextualize. Prosecutors need hours to catalog. Sophie reads one message that mentions her by initial and feels the final insult lose heat.
The mole's decision isn't noble, it's human. Pride breaks before integrity sometimes, but the breach lets light in. In a corner office, Bradley throws something at glass, and the glass, firm and expensive, refuses to shatter for him. Raids look more like paperwork than cinema until the jackets with letters step through doors. Federal agents move with the calm choreography of people who have practiced bad mornings. Cameras capture everything except the quiet apologies rookies whisper to receptionists. Whitman headquarters exhales secrets under subpoena. Screens blare tickers that twitch toward panic. In the penthouse, Sophie watches not for spectacle, but for the absence of fear that finally arrives. Relief is wary at first, peering around the edge of the couch, sniffing the air for traps. Logan stands a thoughtful distance away, respect measured in inches. On split screens, commentators try to taste blood and instead bite law. Somewhere, a junior analyst realizes an internship isn't worth a prison phone. Somewhere else, a donor revises next year's plans. Sophie turns off the sound and lets the pictures admit what words have abused all year. Consequences exist.
Morning headlines pivot like dancers who practiced a new routine overnight. The same outlets that looped a waitress grasping for a phone now frame her as the patient detonator of a corporate minefield. The algorithm purrs with contrition, but contrition doesn't erase frames. Sophie walks into Bellin for coffee, not service, and endures the awkward chorus of congratulations that follows public cruelty when it runs out of courage. Mark DeSoto slides a cup across with the dignity of a man who always saw her fully. Patrons glance without smirking. One lowers her camera. The clip remains online, but a new version joins it. Full audio, urgent pleas, a context that blooms like a field after fire. Sophie doesn't savor the reversal, she files it. Humiliation never refunds interest. Outside, a bus ad sells perfume with a woman who looks untouchable. Sophie laughs once, quick, then goes to work. Courtrooms dispense poison and medicine from the same bench. Today, the docket delivers something that tastes like both, a plea deal that compels Bradley Whitman to read the truth into the record. The words sit awkwardly in his mouth, undiluted by PR sugar. He admits to manipulating academic evidence, to engineering a fall he considered sport. The gallery doesn't gasp, it inhales as one organism deprived too long. Sophie keeps her face still as the tremor ripples her hands backstage. Vindication isn't euphoria, it's pressure leaving through a valve. Reporters rush into the hall to convert confession into content. She steps into a stairwell and leans her head against painted cinder block, grateful for surfaces that don't smile. When she emerges, the sky allows a brief blue. Somewhere, a dean rereads an old letter and feels heat climb his collar. Somewhere, an apology drafts itself and chooses paper.
Evenings return to the ship of glass above the city. The wind feels like the first kind rather than the last. Logan chooses smallness tonight. A table with a view, but not a stage. A bottle without history lessons. A conversation where plans whisper instead of announce. He does not offer rescue, he offers room. Sophie recognizes the difference by the way her breathing doesn't shorten. They negotiate a future like careful attorneys who trust each other's signatures. Work comes first, education resumes, boundaries hold. Affection sits between them without needing to be proven in fireworks. He reaches for her hand only when she reaches back. Below, traffic writes steady lines of white and red. Above, a plane stitches dusk to dark with patience. She sees a life that will demand steadiness more than spectacle, and is surprised by how deeply she wants exactly that. Some contracts are written in ink, some in the stamina to keep standing when stripped of name and comfort. Sophie Hale files the final addendum to humiliation, refusal to be defined by it. The city that once reflected her smallest angles now throws back a truer proportion. Reed Innovations adjusts course toward ethics without applause, because applause was never the point. Carmen Alvarez moves into sunlight measured by afternoons that are not counted in overtime. Elena Vega joins the team that will forever check footnotes for fangs. Somewhere, a scholarship in a dead man's name changes a stranger's odds. Somewhere else, a clerk who once hardened her tone softens it. The old clip still exists, as ruins do, reminding everyone what was survived. On a rooftop, wind worries a linen edge, and Sophie watches the grid below resolve into something less hostile and more honest than before.